as we let ourselves settle. Noticing tensions that might be in the body. Now I'll ring the bell again. See if it sounds differently now that we've been a little more settled. How do we receive the sound? According to the Buddha, our minds are naturally luminous. In each moment, as consciousness first arises, its spark is very bright. But the spark gets covered up by impurities of greed, hatred, and delusion, and they can obstruct the mind's brightness, sometimes leaving the mind feeling dark and very unhappy. So we can't really say that the mind is already pure. We do the work to make it that way. And so we cleanse the luminous mind, letting it shine as best we can without the impurities blocking its brightness. And wisdom that's cultivated through mindfulness burns away the obstructions of greed and hatred and delusion. And the more we remove them, the more the mind becomes comfortable and happy and radiant. Mindfulness can also keep impurities from arising. So our happiness really comes from within our own minds through the use of mindfulness to see clearly greed, hatred, and delusion. And so we peel away these layers of impurities by being present in this moment, choosing a single object of the breath or a touch point, and let mindfulness be there with it. We become aware and we observe. We can see how whatever we're paying attention to arises. It comes into being. It grows. It has a certain length of time that we can pay attention to it. It matures, decays, and dies. And we can see that moment to moment by attending to the breath. And if we stay with the single object as often as we can, returning to it, we may notice some interesting things about it, that it's a long breath or a short breath, that it's a heavy breath or a light breath. We can see that it arises for a period of time. we're present with it, we can see that it dissipates and passes away, that we can't hang on to it. But we can use the returning to the breath or the sit point as a way of really knowing what's happening. And when we have enough interest and energy to pay attention to the object that we choose and see it arise and stay with it until it passes, pay attention to the next object that arises. Awareness is there with it. Over time, we build concentration. And it tends to keep out the hindrances. We may not notice so much restlessness or tiredness or doubt or grasping and clinging or aversion. But those things arise. We see them for what they are, and we can just go back to that single object of the breath or the touch point. It's a training to remain in the present, open and quiet, alert, contemplating the present event that we're noticing. We can suspend judgment and interpretations, and if we need to, we can just register that and then let it drop, see it fall away. So we can ride each wave of the present moment that arises the way a surfer would ride waves on the sea, and we can constantly come back into the present, standing in the here and now, without getting swept away by the tides of distracting thoughts. We just let them go as they arise. calling upon just enough energy to be attentive to noticing what arises in the moment, if we're attending to our breath or if we're noticing whatever else arises. We're with that until we notice that it's gone. If we're with the breath and we notice that it's long or short, heavy or light, rough or smooth, warm or cool, we're noticing sensations. But we're present with the breath. We can notice it at the tip of the nostrils or at the belly as it rises and falls, or we can sometimes feel the breath throughout the entire body. And this attending to the breath or the single object can calm our bodies and still the mind sometimes. We just return again. when we find ourselves, we may be roaming, when we find ourselves lost in thought or just lost in our daydreams or not sure what to do next, we can just return to the breath, being present with the breath, noticing what else comes into the mind by giving it a soft, gentle note and letting it fall away as we develop concentration. We let mindfulness be present. We let awareness be there with it, and wisdom can let us know if we're inclining toward the skillful or not. And we can return to the breath. All these different physical components about ourselves are constantly changing. Feelings, perception, consciousness, and mental objects, they're all arising and passing away. And mindfulness of the present moment allows us insight into these changes, into the pervasive impermanence of all that exists. asking ourselves what is happening in this very moment. What is happening now? What is the quality of the mind? Noticing our breath, experiencing the breath in the body, noticing calming of the body and an inner joy arising each moment that we notice ourselves waking up from our delusion. Or maybe there's a subtle sense of happiness, a kind of calmness, as we notice the mental activity that arises and passes away. We can calm the mental activity with mindfulness there of our breathing. There can be delight in the present moment because we've awakened to it. Whenever we awaken to it, we notice, mindfulness is present, awareness is present, a moment of freedom. And those moments string together. They create faith in the practice, confidence in the practice. We have mindfulness as the core, the umbrella for the 5 faculties, with confidence and energy, concentration, which can lead to equanimity. But we're just with whatever is arising, seeing it clearly, seeing that it passes away, seeing clearly the causes for suffering, of clinging. And the natural way that renunciation occurs when some of our clinging lets go, or some of our aversion lets go, and we can just see a little bit more fall away. We have this dynamic flow of constant change. And as we return over and over again to find that there's no real permanent or eternal entity in it, no permanent eternal self, nothing really to cling to, we begin finding that there's much less to quarrel with. Mindfulness gives us this insight into impermanence and dissatisfaction and non-existence of a permanent self. And as we return over and over again, looking within ourselves, seeing how quickly the physical form changes, we can see that this sense of self, this personal identity that we protect so strongly, is an illusion. And we're a process, a constant flow of physical, emotional, and mental events that are new every moment. And we can begin to allow sensations and feelings and thoughts to pass through the mind without holding on to any particular thing, no matter how pleasant or unpleasant or beautiful or painful or unbearable the state seems to be. They can pass without activating an upset. We can let things happen without trying to stop them and without succumbing to them or trying to get away from them. We just notice things as they are. Returning to the breath. Is it a heavy breath or a light breath? A long breath or a short breath? We notice it as it is. And we can see with wisdom and even with our everyday awareness that we are dependent for our existence on constantly changing causes and conditions. The breath arises and passes away. We can't hang on to it. We're dependent on this constantly changing nature of things. And since there's nothing permanent to attach to and nothing permanent to push away, we can relax into perfect peace of mind and perfect happiness in this very moment. This moment of joy arising. This moment of sensations in the body. Mental states that arise and pass. And as we return again and again to the present moment, noticing what the attitude of the mind is and holding ourselves with kindness. May we let this sense of feeling the breath throughout the body really hold us and contain us, feeling the whole breath within the body. Feeling the stability of knowing that things are constantly changing, constantly falling, pulling the parachute and constantly falling, but no ground to hit. Constant change. We can find actually some stability in that. Wisdom is present. We don't attach to anything permanent. We don't push anything away. And we relax in a perfect peace of mind. And we let this peacefulness pervade our hearts. Letting this kindness envelop ourselves, that we may remind ourselves when we're out of sorts that we have this place in our hearts of kindness and compassion for ourselves when things are challenging. And that this loving kindness can permeate our being and include others in our heart space, in our container. We can include a teacher, a benefactor. Wishing them to be peaceful and tranquil and have ease in their lives. Seeing them healthy and happy within our hearts. Letting this sense of kindness and compassion include a close friend. Seeing them happy and healthy. Including in our hearts thoughts of peacefulness and well-being for them and compassion. Feeling their pain when they feel confused, hoping that they can be free from their suffering and that they also can include themselves in their own compassion. And letting this sense of metta flow to a neutral person. Maybe that group of people sitting at the table in the world's central kitchen feeding them. Or someone that you saw on the street recently. Or a group of people. Those who may be experiencing oppression or violence. Letting our kindness and compassion meet that person or those people from a place of equanimity, of caring without falling into extremes of pity or distancing ourselves. letting a sense of joy and lightheartedness in the practice that we have this time and ability to share this kindness and compassion with others. And letting this inclination of the heart and mind to include other family members, people in our circle that aren't here, other beings known and unknown. Those who are in suffering and those who are in joy. Those enlightened and those unenlightened. May all beings everywhere have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering, enmity, and danger. Anicca vata sankara upadavaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te samvapasamo sukho. All conditioned things arise and pass away. Subject to impermanence. And as we see this clearly and directly with mindfulness, it brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. And may the merits of our practice, the goodness of our practice, the efforts that we make in sitting here to see what arises and passes, may it have great benefit to others. And as you gently let your eyes open, letting light in and noticing conditions change, what arises, what happens in the mental faculties of the mind, what happens in the heart as we change and add seeing to our reality. And we have the great joy of seeing each other in our circle. And I thank you for your practice.